Hi, welcome to mediatorpodcast.com, a podcast and video series about mediation, negotiation, and collaboration. My name is Melissa Gragg, and I'm a valuation expert and divorce financial mediator in St. Louis, Missouri. Today, we are with Rosalia Labate, and she's located in New York, and she's a certified divorce financial analyst and certified public accountant. She provides services like financial forensics, divorce finances, business valuations, and quite frankly, we work in a lot of the same spaces, but do things a little bit differently. And so one of the things that we wanted to talk about today, and this will be a little bit different podcast, if you will, but we're going to talk about 3 of the big myths that we see around the financial aspects of divorce. And it's going to be more of a conversational type of thing because we have 2 financial experts who really have a significant experience in, like decades of experience in divorce. And what we find is that people have a lot of the same questions. And so I thought it would be interesting to talk about like a couple different perspectives on the same myths. And then we'll kind of go through 3 myths. Myth 1, which I think is kind of interesting and has been discussed on online, TikTok, Instagram by a lot of people. And myth number 1 that we want to talk about today is an attorney is the best person to file the financial affidavit. And basically, Rosalia, you might have to explain a little bit about this question as well, or this myth, but kind of start us off in, is the attorney the person that we want to file the financial affidavit? And what is a financial affidavit?
Good morning, Melissa, and thank you for having me on. So a financial affidavit is actually the first step that you have to do with the attorney when you're going through your divorce. It's called different things in different states. Here in New York, we call it a statement of net worth. And basically, it's got your expenses, it's got your assets, it's got your debts, it's got everything that you need to move forward financially with your divorce. Why is it a myth that the attorney is the best person to file it? Well, I have a question for you. If you have an ear problem, would you go to a foot doctor to resolve that ear issue? To me, it's the same thing with the financial affidavit. Why does everyone go to their attorney first as opposed to going to a financial professional first to take care of that issue? I've successfully worked with clients to prepare their financial affidavits so that they are ready for the attorney. And one of the benefits of working with me or working with you is that when I'm going through the process with my clients, I can help steer them and give them suggestions as to which attorneys would work best with them, given the circumstances and the personality of the client that I'm working with. You need to like your attorney because it's a very long emotional journey to begin with.
Yeah, and I think I think that a lot of times at the beginning, people just get confused about what is a financial issue and what is a legal issue. And a legal issue could be child support and alimony calculations, but those feel like financial issues, like they're dealing with money, but they have a legal kind of calculation or rubrics of how to develop them in each state. So like attorneys typically work on a state by state, like they're licensed in a certain state and they understand the state legal rules. Whereas financial experts are typically can work in any state and they have to understand their own financial perspective or financial aspect. Like how do you get divorced with a business valuation in Missouri might be different than California, New York, Florida, Colorado. Like all of them are going to have different rules. And I think financial people can actually work in any state. And we do a lot of things online. So this financial affidavit, which is really could be called a financial disclosure, it could be called, other types of disclosures in the court, and you can look online to see what forms you have to fill out. But a lot of times when you hire an attorney, they're giving you those forms, you're filling them out, and then they're just filing it through the system, either electronically or in some fashion. And so that first financial affidavit could be a settlement offer or is a lot of the makings of the settlement offer, but it's just sort of thrown together as the beginning part of the legal situation. So are you seeing attorneys bring financial experts in to develop that financial affidavit or disclosure at the very beginning of the divorce?
I see it sometimes in complex divorce matters. I would love to see it more. I know in New York, there is a cap. So if you're working to determine child support or alimony from the legal perspective, if your lifestyle is more than what your state specific cap is, you still have to prove it in a court of law. And I believe a judge will look at a financial professional's prepared affidavit um, more positively than they would something that's prepared from the attorney, because we're looking at the black and white, or at least I'm looking at the black and white. And we've done a rigorous process to get there. So you brought up a good point, and another good point is yes, we can work throughout the country. We're not bound by any credentials that we may need. So, and again, we've had years and years of experience doing this. An attorney may or may not have. And I'd say 98% of the time, whether the financial affidavit was prepared by the client themselves or the attorney, it's not right. It's just not right. And I think that, you know, another point in terms of alimony and child support, you want to get the most that you can. So, and you really want to have an accurate and realistic picture of what not only went on, but what you may need in the future. And I mean, look, we've got finance degrees. Attorneys have law degrees. Why not go to the specialist for what you need?
Well, and I think that we're going to an attorney because that just like this is a legal process. I don't know what else to do, so I'm going to start there. And the financial affidavit, and you can fill it out, but a lot of times what we're getting calls for is the person who has access to the business, the person that has access to the money. And they are calling and preparing in advance. They are calling and saying, okay, what is the business valuation? Like, what is the business worth? Like, how much am I going to have to pay out? They are calling and saying, like, what is the alimony that I'm going to pay because I'm off the charts? Like, I make too much money that the chart doesn't like, and the chart really, a lot of states ends at like 300 or 350 or 400,000, and doctors and lawyers alone are typically at a 500,000 or more level. So like you're off the charts almost immediately for professional practices. But if you don't think that the person who owns the business isn't prepping for a divorce, and I think that that's what we don't have in mind, that typically when there's a business valuation involved in a divorce, it is ripe for manipulation. So not only manipulation in I'm running personal expenses through the business and I've been doing that for decades, but now I'm getting divorced and everybody's looking. It's not only, oh, I've been, using my purchases in my business to hide my gambling or my drinking or my, cheating on my spouse. And oh, shoot, now you're going to find out. Or I've like defrauded the IRS. Like any of these things have been done over time. And now I'm getting divorced and they're coming to light. So I'm looking at finding out information of like, what's my best case, worst case scenario? So if you think you're going into a divorce with a financially sophisticated person and you're at a level playing field, you are not. And your attorney is not leveling the playing field. They're leveling the playing field legally. Like legally, you need to match wits maybe with your spouse's attorney, but financially, you're not matching wits if you're just hiring an attorney. You have to match with sophistication. And right now, sophistication could cost you $100,000 if you're just doing things the same way as they've been done in the past, or they could cost less, but you got to be creative. You got to be looking at, some of these options that are possibilities. Like, have you seen, and a lot of times we're seeing them in mediation, but I'm seeing creativity is needed because there's so much manipulation and you might not get to a clear financial picture. Like it might not be possible to unwind the personal expenses and things like that.
Yeah, a lot of times I'm working with the non-moneyed spouse who has no idea what the spending is. And I can't stress enough, it should be top of mind. The lifestyle should be top of mind. It sets the stage for the rest of the financial picture. And one of the things that I see over and over again on that financial affidavit is that this expense is paid by the business. This expense is paid by the business. It is never quantified. And that takes digging. That's why I think it's also important, because a lot of times I will work as the financial professional, and if it's in a courtroom setting, a neutral will be hired to do the business valuation. Well, I come in and I scrutinize the expenses. I look at the same documents because there is so much that is run through the typical business that it needs to be quantified, because the spending is still going to be there. Unfortunately, in the future, it will be coming out of your pocket. The business will no longer be paying for it. And it's these are just hidden expenses that you're not aware of. And I have not seen attorneys quantify what these expenses are. And again, it goes to lifestyle, like, just as an example, like generally the cell phone is paid through the business and the country clubs are paid through the business. And entertainment is paid through the business. Well,
and lack of details in your mediation agreement, in your divorce agreement that says, here were the expenses, here's how we calculated their income, here's how we calculated all of this stuff. If it's vague, you have no foot to stand on if there's an issue and you have to come back to court afterwards. If you have to come back to court afterwards and we're just like, oh, we just agreed on the maintenance or the alimony to be this amount, but we didn't determine the income and we didn't stipulate what the income was, you go in for a modification of maintenance, which your spouse would elicit within the first 3 years of you getting this award, you don't have a leg to stand on. So I think that it's really important for the individual to advocate for themselves, know the numbers, get the right details. If somebody's just telling you something, you get the documentation, like, oh, that's great that you spent, $300,000 on family expenses. Can you show me where? Can you show me the accounts? Can you show me the statements? Like, we're in Missouri, so it's the show me state. But like, that is important in any of this process, to not even trust your attorney or your expert. And I know that sounds crazy, but I will tell you that, like, we only know our space, right? I can give you advice in this space, but you have to know what your situation is and whether that makes sense. And everybody around you is going to be like giving you, it's like when you have a baby and everybody gives you all this advice and you're like, oh my God, like, this is not even helpful. Like, I don't care. What are you talking about? Like, that's part of, I think, this process of getting a financial person involved, because you're asking them the crazy questions. You're asking them these details that nobody else even knows is important.
Yeah, and I think you brought up another important point. How many times have you seen um, where the couple has expenses, and then you look at the personal expenses through the business? You add that information up together, and it in no way, shape, or form relates to the amount of income that the couple is showing. It's so much more than that income. Where is the money coming from? And
Well,
no one
and you
looks
make a
at that.
good point. Attorneys look at different pieces of information, different numbers, and we're looking at the big picture, because I cannot tell you how many times I see a tax return and I see $50,000 of income on the tax return, and I see people living in $1 million house. And the vice versa, I see 500,000 on a tax return and random expenses that make it seem like there's not much left, yet we have nothing to account for it. We don't have no house, no nothing. And we've been making $1 million every year over and over and over and over and over and over, but there's nothing to account for it. So like, if you don't look at the big picture and you just look at the context of some small piece, you would say in each situation, well, they don't have any money, or they do have money. And in both situations, it was incorrect. In both situations, what appeared, and I think that that's the issue, is that we have a lot of divorces that appear wealthy divorces, that appear to have, things that are very expensive, and yet the cash flow is not happening. And so, maybe does an attorney understand the difference between cash flow and the value of assets?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because a lot of times when I get court appointed, um, I'm court appointed to prepare a business valuation. And at the same time, the judge wants an income stream analysis. So it's very telling that at least the judges that I've dealt with understand that there can very well be a discrepancy. And when I'm doing both of those things simultaneously, that's when, lo and behold, all these expenses come in from out of the sky. Look, it's a bird, it's a plane, it's a personal expense that was being paid for by the business. And again, I think it's so very important to be able to work hand in hand with the attorney at the very beginning, if not before the attorney is hired. Because I've also, as you may have as well, I've prepared the financial affidavit first. And then the client is not only armed with the financial affidavit, the client is armed with questions I may have that aren't readily apparent, with documents that may be needed that the attorney can most likely only get through the discovery process. It cuts the attorney's work by, substantially. So the attorney can do the legal work because the financial work has already been started. And more often than not, that financial affidavit, if you have to go to trial, is pretty much, complete. The attorney may ask for an update if you're going to trial because it's so far down the road. But that's nothing in comparison to doing the work at the beginning and having the process done.
Well, and I think, quite frankly, as the attorney comes into a situation, a lot of times they have experts that they use. And so the expert will be called in at the very beginning as well. Or we have a lot of really high net worth cases. We might prep the financial affidavit for months in order to see what was marital waste. We might look at what the business valuations are. We might still say to be determined, but we might want to have an idea of what the valuations are. And quite frankly, the financial person puts together a property statement, which is very similar to what you have to provide to the court. But we're looking at it of how to negotiate. right? And if you don't look at how to negotiate, and it's not just like, what's my best case, worst case? It's what's their best case, worst case. It's what are they going to come, and how do you combat that? And so it's really, I think that you can look at a full financial strategy at the very beginning as you're putting together that financial affidavit. You know, like we have one now that we're presenting, or we're going to file this week or next week. We've been working for 6 months. You know, like again, they have about 150 accounts. So that's a little bit different scenario where, you know, you have a lot of different things going on, but we really have a position of, you know, like what numbers are we reporting? Are we reporting numbers that we now know are missing because he's depleted assets? Are we reporting current numbers, or reporting numbers at the separation date, at the prenup date, at the postnup date? I mean, like some of that is legal, but some of that is financial. And I think what we're trying to say is you have to look at it from all perspectives. And unfortunately, sometimes attorneys will leave experts out, and sometimes experts will leave attorneys out, you know? So it's really finding that balance that you're in control of some of that situation, right? And I don't think people treat it like that. I think they hire the attorney and they're like, I'm just going to listen, whatever the attorney says. They're the boss. They're going to save me. And I don't know if that's their role, is to save you, right?
Yeah, no, not at all. And a lot of times I'll get phone calls from clients in the 11th hour where I'm going to trial, or there's a settlement proposal in front of me. And what do I do? And I haven't been there. So I don't know how accurate your financial affidavit is. Who looked at it in your attorney's office? Someone in your a paralegal or an associate in your attorney's office looked at your financial affidavit, and your financial affidavit is showing $25,000 a month in spending, but yet your tax return is showing $60,000 a year in income. Did anyone address that? But now you're going to trial in a month.
Yeah.
And you don't even have all the documents that are needed to reconcile the two. You know, there is definitely an intersection that the best person to review that and to look at that and to address that and to help you understand that is the financial person.
And it's immediate. Like we see it immediate. Like somebody sent me an offer yesterday and they're like, could you review this offer? And within 3 minutes of looking at the offer, I was like, clearly, and I'll tell you what it said. It said, I'm going to keep the house and I'm going to pay you out your part of the equity when I sell it sometime in the future. Okay, red flag, like red flag, red flag, like I didn't even need to go further than that sentence. And it was literally like, this is not in your best interest. It's not probably what the court would agree to in any state, okay, from a financial aspect that I've seen. But it also had just, once that red flag hit, I knew that it was going to be a cascade of offer that was all on one side, and really that, and they're sending it to this individual that doesn't have representation, doesn't have a financial person, you know, like that's what's happening out here. And in my mind, if you hire an attorney and they're not immediately telling you who the expert they're hiring, or that they're recommending, or that what their process is that involves a financial person, I would have an issue with it. Because one thing that it tells me is that they have not, I talked to a person yesterday and he's like, this is the second time I've needed to have an expert in my cases in my career. Okay. Do you know what that tells me about that attorney? He is not doing big cases. This is the second time that he's had a decent issue. You always need an expert with a business valuation. So you haven't done any of those probably, you know, like to me, that's signaling that they are in a little bit over there. I'm coming in with more of the expertise. But this is just myth number one. Do we have anything to like close out myth number one? Because we have two more to talk about.
Oh goodness. Well, I mean, I thought I definitely hope that we have dispelled this myth that the attorney is the best person to file the financial affidavit. I think that regardless of how much money is in the estate, everyone can use some help and understand that you don't need to have $50 million to hire a financial forensic or a business valuation person to kind of see what's what. We can tailor to your needs. And in the long run, it will most likely save you money because you will not be spending it with your attorney.
Yeah, and I think that clearly you just need to understand that divorces are done with a team. And whether you're going into litigation or mediation or collaborative process, that a financial neutral or expert is going to help you understand the numbers. And for the most part, when we are working with attorneys, they don't have the answers to these questions. They have the same questions that you may have. So ask the questions, get the right answers from the right person, and stay tuned because we're going to have two more myths. The two other myths are you don't need a business valuation, and the third myth is that mediation won't work. So check back with us here and we will continue on.